fun activities, such as ice hockey, evening dances, and ski jumping. The starstruck Horvath was also able to meet some key Hollywood players. On January 21st, he wrote to his wife, "I visited friend and fellow Hungarian illustrator Willy Pogani last night. It's in my best interest to have a good relationship with him because he knows everyone who is someone in the movie industry. There was a chief cameraman at his place last night who gets paid $1,000 weekly." And he was Academy Award-winning cinematographer Charles Rocher. When he found out I worked for Disney, he could not stop praising our movies, mentioning how wonderful they are. And he would know. It wasn't all fun and parties, though. In a letter a few weeks later, he described how his work was progressing at the studio. "The first few days I was not in sync with things. Taking an 8-month break from the drawing board is noticeable, especially considering that I was lifting heavy boxes and was nailing a lot, the type of work that is not good for an artist's hand. I can now say that I'm back to my old self and routine. They are good here. They don't pressure you. My luck, I got another mob scene where I have to design and animate about 70 animals in running position in 20 drawings for the silly symphony Father Noah's Ark. Today was my 8th day on this scene, and it will take another 4 days for sure before I'm done. It will be an expensive scene. Only Disney can afford this. Cost is not an issue. The mob scene is quite boring to draw." And here are some character studies he did for Father Noah's Ark. I gotta see that short again. All in good time. 2 weeks later, by February 24th, Ferdinand had moved from the animation department to the publicity department headed by Tom Wood. This department was responsible for creating the posters and other advertising art as well as illustrations for books and magazines. In a letter to Ellie dated March 2nd, 1933, he wrote, "I finished the illustrations, the ones I mentioned I'm doing for Disney. Today and now I will most likely be working on pop-up books for Blue Ribbon. You know, those books that you open and the figures stand up? So every week I have to do something I've never done before. All these illustrations have to be done differently than I would have liked. So if I stay with Disney for too long, they will ruin my style." Horvath did end up working on at least one Blue Ribbon pop-up book, the adaptation of the Mickey Mouse short, Ye Olden Days. Riding out the storm. Work may have been slightly frustrating, but there was much worse for Horvath. But what was much worse for Horvath is that uncertainty seemed to be everywhere, which meant that he could not yet send for Ellie. On March 4th, the new president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, had been inaugurated. The Great Depression was at its height, and panic was looming. On March 6th, the president declared the mandatory closing of the banks, which managed to stabilize the situation. But businessmen knew that the economy was far from recovered, and that they would have to take some drastic measures if they wanted to survive. On Thursday, March 16th, Walt and Roy Disney convened a meeting on the studio soundstage, as Horvath detailed in a letter to Ellie a few days later. He said, "There was a huge meeting on Thursday night from 5 to 7. There were Walt, Roy, and their lawyer, Gunther Lessing. Walt was sitting in the corner of the room, all quiet, with concern wrinkling his face. Roy was speaking as the business manager. As we know, other studios have either shut their doors or drastically reduced their staff salary by 50% or for 8 weeks. Roy and the lawyer shared their plan of reducing everyone's salary by 25%, but not for 8 weeks. For a whole year. The 25% will remain with the company, like a loan from the employees. The employees will have the right to get stock for up to the 25%, or if things start to look brighter in a year, the company will be willing to pay this back in weekly installments. What the other studios have done is a lot crazier, and compared to their heartless cuts, this offer is a rather fair plan favored by everyone. Originally, they wanted people to vote on whether they would take the stock option or the repayment plan. But then it was decided to give us a day to think about it before a new meeting on Friday. Friday night, we did have our second meeting. At that time, Walt spoke. He told all of us that he personally doesn't favor one option over the other. He ended up telling us that he was only going to cut our pay by 10%, and if the studio produces better and more effectively, they will pay the 10% back. This plan was even fairer than the other one. Then came the hiccup, and that's me. He can only offer this 10% reduction by letting go all of the new employees, so the others can benefit from our loss. Last week, they already let a lot of people go. Saturday, I was called into his office and he told me that he was sorry, but that he had to let me go. He wanted to give me 2 weeks' pay or offered to pay my way back to New York. At that point, I told him I was sorry too, but we had a 6-month contract and he had to respect that. Harsh words followed. We discussed everything for about an hour. I found out that the animation department manager, Ben Sharpstein, made me look bad in Disney's eyes. He told him that I work slowly. It's those insane mob scenes which drive you crazy, and that I am too independent. You can imagine the murderous mood Disney is in lately, mixed with my not exactly quiet mood due to the possible bankruptcy, the recent earthquake, and being picked on, bullied, etc., etc. We ended up talking it through. Disney said, "No hard feelings?" I said, "Of course not." To make a long story short, starting tomorrow I will be working in the story department. The story department manager is Bill Cottrell, one of Disney's old friends with whom I got along great so far. I haven't worked with him yet, so I will find out how things will be. That's that. This is my last chance. I will know more in a few days. And one more thing. Yesterday when I was leaving the studio, I bumped into Disney, 2 hours after our big argument. He was all smiles and extremely friendly, as if nothing bad happened. The first parting of ways. 4 days later, Ferdinand had joined the story department. We get rough story sketches and we have to create the gags, he detailed in another letter to Ellie. We design the characters, then we are assigned to a director, who then uses his own layout to modify it and give it the shape it will have in the final version. The past 3 days I have worked on 17 gags, but I don't know if Disney will like them or not since he will not see them until the end of the week. The atmosphere at the studio is quite disturbing. The boys are angry since there were more cuts, and they are being asked to work overtime for no extra pay. You know me, I don't get involved. I see everything, I hear everything, but as usual I don't talk about any of it, and that's how I cope with it. Despite the uncertainty that surrounded him, things were clearly improving work-wise. He was now almost totally focused on his story assignments. And there was even better news. It is a good sign that the first feature-length production, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, is definitely planned, he wrote to Ellie. So it's not likely that Disney will cut the staff, and my impression is that since he saw my work personally and does not listen to other people's reports, his attitude towards me seems to have changed. At least he's friendlier than before. I have a feeling that even if it's going to be a tough few months, it's worth sticking with Disney, because if Disney continues with what he started, he will make all other cartoons impossible, and he will call all the shots in this business because there are no other cartoons like ours. By the end of March, Horvath had started working with director Wilfred Jackson on layouts for Lullaby Land, followed by a few weeks later by The Pied Piper. And by June he was working on the character designs for the Hot Chocolate Soldier short along with Albert Herter. But since he knew his contract with the studio would end exactly 1 month later, always worried about the uncertain future, he started sending out feelers to other studios. Especially the new animation studio established by Leon Schlesinger on the Warner Brothers lot. That was through his former colleagues Tom Palmer and Jack King. His efforts in that direction were half-hearted. On June 15th, he wrote to Ellie, In secret, I am hoping that Warner does not want to pay me $125. Then I wouldn't have to go to and work there, because Warner would be a very lousy place after Disney. On June 29th, however, Schlesinger's brother-in-law, Ray Katz, made Ferdinand a formal author. $100 a week during the first year, $125 during the second, and $150 during the third. Horvath knew that this was an excellent proposal, since even his Disney colleague Albert Herder was only making $85 a week at the time. Still, Ferdinand wanted to give Walt a chance to keep him. On July 12th, he wrote to Ellie, "In the meantime, Walt called me into his office yesterday afternoon. I thought he would finally make a move at the 12th hour. He closed the door and asked me to sit down. I saw that he wanted to say something. He was hesitating. I thought to myself I'd rather bite my tongue off than be the one mentioning anything. He said nothing. He pulled out a scene that I did a few days ago and he wanted a few changes. Maybe he had it with him just in case. I was thinking about this all evening and decided that, damn you, I mean Disney, I know you're in a difficult position with me since the March clash, and I'm going to swallow my pride just once more and extend a friendly hand. So at 8 this morning, I asked Miss Carolyn Schaefer to give me an appointment with Walt. At 10, Walt came down to the bungalow to see Albert and me, strictly on business. Before he left, he asked me in front of Albert, Did you want to see me? Yes, I said, but in your private office. What for? He asked slyly. Well, I said, our agreement is up. Is it? He asked. It is, I said. Well, he asked, what do you say? I said, I have nothing to say. It's your move. He laughed at that. He knew I was right. All right, he said, I'll give you a buzz as soon as I find time. And that's that. My Disney journey comes to an end. Because he, of course, didn't have any time today, and Thursday is his busiest day because of the sweatbox tests. And on Friday, he's off to Chicago for 10 days where United Artists has a convention. And it would be foolish of me to possibly pass a positive offer based on an uncertain promise when I know that Disney will offer at least $25 to $30 less. Ferdinand left Disney on Saturday, July 29th. The parting was a friendly one, and on August 5th, 1933, Walt wrote to Horvath, Dear friend Horvath, I am sorry I did not get to say goodbye to you before you left, but after returning from my trip east, I was very tired and in need of rest. I was unable to get back to work until Monday. I am sorry that you've felt it necessary to give up all that you have been building with